Everyone thinks that women are crazy when they hit perimenopause or menopause. The truth is, we were always crazy. We've always been crazy. We just hide it until we realize that hiding it is killing us. Because crazy is the only sane response to a world that treats you like an object with a shelf life. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Naomi, and this is Mosaic in Progress. I am not making a podcast episode about perimenopause. I said that quote to my husband. I said the intro to my husband several weeks ago. It's not a quote. I said it. I made it up. It is original to me. I quoted myself from my brain. And even though we're not talking about perimenopause and menopause today, I felt like it fit with the episode today. Today we're going to be talking about isolation and society. And we have become a very isolated society. And there are a lot of people who would blame that on phones and social media. And to a degree, they would be correct, but not in the way that they think that they are. There is an underlying problem that is just never addressed that I think we need to talk about. Because people talk about phones taking up so much of our time and people being addicted to phones and addicted to social media. And I am old enough to remember when nobody had smartphones or cell phones in general, and people just, interacted with each other. And that when cell phones became a thing and texting, particularly, especially, became a thing, and then smartphones came out and social media became a thing, that the criticism that was always given to the teenagers who were allowed the privilege of having these phones: stop talking to your friends on there and engage with the people who are right here. I remember hearing that a lot as criticisms given to the teenagers who were just checked out of wherever they were at the time. I was thinking about it earlier this week, and the problem is not that we're addicted to our phones. The problem is we think we get connection there. And to a degree, you can get connection there. If you're friends with somebody who lives on the other side of the world, that's a great way for you to keep in touch. But we use it to keep in touch with people who live on the other side of town. I had a thought that felt really weird. And when I have thoughts that feel really weird and like, I don't know where that fits into a category, it's a little out there, it's a little off, I always feel like it needs to be expressed out into the world, that somebody needs to hear that, because if I've never heard it or heard someone talk like that, then it probably needs to be put out there. It needs to be discussed. I'm not necessarily saying it's the right thought or I've just had this epiphany that's going to change the world, but it definitely needs to be discussed. I have some really good friends who I connect with on a soul level. They are my sisters from another dimension. They are some of the best people I've known in my life, and none of them live close to me. And I connect with them through my phone, almost exclusively. If I'm lucky, I might see some of them once a week or so, but not all of them, and not consistently. And I had this weird thought that maybe the reason we're so disconnected as a society is because we've, in essence, curated our algorithm of people so finely that we're only interacting consistently with the people who feel most in alignment with our own selves. And those people might not live close to us. And that's not to say those interactions are bad. But I do think we use them as a substitute, because prior to smartphones, prior to cell phones and texting, prior to social media, prior to the internet, the majority of people interacted with the people who were around them. Their friends were their neighbors. Their friends were their coworkers. Their friends were the people who they saw and interacted with every day. That was their circle. That was their community. And that was normal. And you didn't have to be completely aligned politically or religiously or just straight up vibes. You just needed to be in proximity, because that's how you build a society. And we don't connect with our neighbors anymore at all, because we can find connection on our phones. I barely know any of my neighbors. I've lived here 2 years. I barely know any of them. The place that I lived in before, I met one of my neighbors and actually kind of got to know her about 6 months before I moved out. We don't connect with our neighbors anymore. And I remember growing up, I always knew who my neighbors were, and I would go visit them. Like, my sisters and I, we would always go visit our neighbors. And I've taken the time to reflect on that, and it was me and my sisters, and we were children. My mother was not the one going with us. My father never went with us. It was us as children connecting with our neighbors, because we were children and we had a lot more free time and a lot less responsibility. But I always knew who my neighbors were, and I hung out with them a lot. And I don't know my neighbors anymore. I haven't for a really long time, and I've been unemployed for 2 months. I could have gotten to know any of my neighbors, and I have not. I have sat in my house making podcasts and writing songs and poetry and creating art, and not had anything to do with anyone. And we have begun to revel in introvert culture. And this is not in any way hatred towards introverts, or ambiverts for that matter, which I consider myself an ambivert. It's an acknowledgement that our society, because of social media, has elevated checking out of society. What do I mean by that, checking out of society? We have created a culture, and it's been decades in the making, where you can be a part of society without actually participating in it. You can enjoy the benefits of society without actually truly contributing to it. And part of that comes from the outsourcing of community to programs. And some of them are government programs, and some of them are just nonprofit community programs. But rather than checking in on our neighbors, you know, the little old lady who's been widowed for 15 years and can't get out of her house, rather than checking in on the new mother down the road, we assume that SNAP benefits got them covered, that government programs that our tax dollars go to have them covered, that the food pantries got them covered, that all of these social programs in place have them covered, and we don't need to check in on them because, you know, our tax dollars are going to that, and we're already worked to death. We don't have any energy left. So how are we going to go take care of somebody else? And before you think I'm calling you out for telling you that you need to do things that you don't have the energy to do, just wait, because that's not what I'm saying at all. We have found our connection with others through our phones, and so we've stopped connecting with those around us. We've stopped connecting with our neighbors, with our coworkers, because we can find like-minded individuals. We can find our soul tribe. whatever it is. And I don't want to diminish that, because there is a significant importance to that, especially if you have grown up feeling out of place or neglected. There's a huge importance to finding the people who are like you and finding the people where you do feel comfortable and accepted. That's not building community, though. It's not building a society. Because to build community and to build society, you have to be in proximity. I cannot build community, truly, a true community, with someone halfway around the world. We can have connection. We can have some, superficial community. We can have deep talks over text or messenger or video chat or whatever, but to truly build community, to be able to be there for somebody, you have to be in proximity to them. That's what community is, and we've lost that in our society, because we can find the people who are just like us on social media. And if you are a left-leaning type of person and you're thinking, that sounds like MAGA, I was actually talking about you specifically. MAGA certainly has its own place in this, and they're not exempt, but I'm actually more referring to left-leaning people, because we can interact with each other on social media all day. And we can see the person across town who's doing this stuff for the people across town, and we can support them and think, oh, maybe I should be over there too, but it's across town. That's a long drive, and I've already worked all day. Rather than using social media as a means to connect with them and to build ideas that you can flourish in your own community, we're checked out of our own communities. I don't want to be with those people. Who even are they? I don't even know them. They don't get involved in anything. I mean, neither do I, but they don't get involved in anything. And we have developed a culture of saying, I understand, when people need help, or rather, when we need help. And I have been the I understand person for most of my life. At any point that I have actually needed help and had the audacity to ask for it, almost without exception, people did not show up. I had a lot of people say they would show up, and then they did not. And they all had very valid reasons for it. I'm not going to shame somebody because, you're sick or you're depressed or you've got, kids that need this or that or the other, or whatever happens to be going on. I'm not going to shame you for that. And so it has become almost my mantra to say, I understand. I need help. Will you please help me? I will help you. Oh, you didn't show up. I understand. And I always understand. I wrote a poem about it a few years ago. The title of the poem was, I understand. I understand, I always do, was the first line of the poem. Because it felt sickening to me at that point how often I said I understand, and how much more often I said I understand than I said thank you. A couple of years ago, maybe it was last year, I don't know. Years run together. I read Brené Brown's book, Daring Greatly. And the entire point of that book was that we cannot have connection without being vulnerable. We have to be vulnerable to have connection. There's no real connection without vulnerability. And I think about that book and the things that she wrote in it all the time. And I think about that in context of society and connection and community. We have to be able to be vulnerable to receive, but we have to be able to be vulnerable to give as well. And I promise I'm not going to do like I did a couple of episodes ago and turn this into an entire sex metaphor, though quite frankly, I really want to, because it fits. That was not a double entendre, but you're welcome for it. It was not an intentional double entendre, but you're welcome for it. It fits. You have to be vulnerable to both receive and give. We think a lot about the vulnerability of receiving, of allowing someone to come help you and see you, when you haven't showered in 2 weeks or haven't been able to do your dishes in who knows how long or whatever. And there certainly is vulnerability related to that, but you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to give as well, and not to come in as this big, strong rescuer. I'm strong and I see you as weak. I've been there before, but I'm not there now. I'm here for you. You can show up absolutely the hottest of messes you've ever been, chaotically, maybe late, and do what you do to help the person who needs help. Because I promise you, if someone is asking for help and needing help, they don't care if you're showing up looking put together. They don't care how you show up. It is just that you show up. And we think we need to be in a certain mind frame, and I don't mean this in a like how you need to show up for yourself and how you need to make sure that your needs are met and that you are mentally okay with whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, show up however you are. If you're showing up for your friend, all you need to bring with you is love. That's it. And we get so hung up on aesthetics and so many ridiculous things that we forget that that's the whole point. The point is love. The point is connection. And we're very quick to judge ourselves and others for how you're showing up or not showing up, or how you're allowing people to show up. And judgment is the enemy of connection. Always. Always. As I think back on, and I don't mean this to be in the, trad wife, things were better back in the day kind of dynamic, but thinking back on how people used to connect with their neighbors and know their neighbors. And I mentioned earlier in the podcast episode how we checked ourselves out of building community with different social programs. And that is not at all to shame social programs or the people who need them or use them. That is not the point that I am making at all, even remotely. But we used to check on people. We used to check on the little old lady down the street, or the new mom down the street, or the couple whose kids just went off to college and became empty nesters, or whatever. We used to actually talk to people and communicate with them and check on them. And I don't think phones are the main source to blame for that no longer being the case. And I don't think government programs are the main source to blame for that no longer being the case. The economy is to blame. We have so many people working themselves to death because they can't afford to live if they don't. They have no energy anymore for connecting with their neighbors, because they're working 60, 80-hour weeks just to barely make ends meet, if they're even making ends meet. We've seen the rise of regulations that have eliminated, either entirely or partially, autonomy and self-sufficiency. And what do I mean by that? In many urban areas, it's actually illegal to have a garden. You can't grow certain vegetables and fruits. Can't have certain animals like chickens because they are deemed to be a nuisance. And it used to be that just about everybody had a garden, even if it was a small one. And a large number of people had small animals like chickens. And not in urban areas, but suburban areas and some urban areas, depending on yard space and things like that. And it was determined that that was unacceptable. And we decided that that was how to civilize society, that we didn't need to grow our own vegetables or have our own chickens, because we could go to the grocery store for that, and that made us more civilized. And that was the propaganda that was given to us, because if you're not growing a whole bunch of zucchini, then you're not giving it to your neighbors, and they're not giving you their tomatoes, and the other neighbor isn't giving everybody corn. And so you're disconnected. You don't have a reason to collaborate with each other, to coordinate with each other, to share with each other. I grew up in pretty rural Northwest Georgia on a very small farm. We always had a garden, and it got bigger every year, and we raised chickens for eggs, and while we were in 4-H, we raised hogs and sheep and beef cattle. And after we got out of 4-H for a few years, there would be a small little beef cow that we would raise. I grew up hearing how city life was just destroying America and the Christian way of life, and people living in the city were relying on the government instead of relying on God, and all of this, and the prioritization of individual freedom over anything. Because if you don't have individual freedom, you don't have anything. And to a degree, I don't disagree with that. Without autonomy, nothing's voluntary. But I think that there is a huge point that is missed in most right-wing ideology and conservative ideology and everything that most of the right espouses today. Because they're not wrong. Individual freedom should be paramount. Consent is always the most important thing. But the thing that gets left out of it is that you don't exist on an island. Individual freedom, of course, is important, but if you want to participate in society, if you want to build a society, if you want to cooperate with people, if you want to have a community, then you have to enter into an agreement with them about how that's going to work. And so much of society today is unwritten rules because we've been around each other for a very long time now. But there are written rules, and we call them laws, and there are unwritten rules, and the unwritten rules are the ones that we agree to participate in society. If I am going to live in proximity to other people, I am not going to be a nuisance to them with my existence on purpose. If I am going to exist in society, in proximity to other people, if other people do things that bother me, then I am going to follow a course of action to communicate that to them. I'm not just going to eliminate them from the face of the earth so I don't have to be bothered by them anymore. I will have a discussion with them, either face-to-face or with a mediator. I am not going to do things with my property, on my property, that are going to cause harm to the people around me, knowingly. If someone who is living in proximity to me is doing things that are going to cause harm to me or my family or anyone else in their proximity, I am going to follow the proper channels to have a discussion about it, either face-to-face or through a mediator. And we have elected our judicial system to be our mediators in these scenarios. And those are two very generic examples. But it gets left out of every discussion of right-wing politics that centers individual freedom. Individual freedom is only as good as individual accountability will sustain it. And individual freedom within a society must acknowledge that you are consenting to follow the agreed upon rules of society, which are those that I just named and several others that are basically just, we are here for the betterment of each other. We are cooperating for the common good. You are part of the common good. I am part of the common good. All of us participating in this society are here for the common good, and we are living collectively because collectively, we can be better off than if we just try to make it on our own without any support. I grew up very isolated. And I grew up being gaslit about how isolated I was because, like, we participated in 4-H and we visited our grandparents a few times a year and some other relatives. And so, of course you're not isolated. You know, you see other people. And for a few years, we had neighbors who were our friends. I remember being profoundly lonely all the time as a child. It was like an aching in my chest. I would just start crying all the time, and my mother would find me and just, why are you crying? And I'm so lonely. And she would tell me to hang out with my sisters, and I felt the loneliest when I was with them, quite frankly. I never felt like I fit in anywhere. I never felt like I was accepted. I just existed in proximity to these people. And I say that because I think that our communication system and phones and social media and etc. has given us a blessing of being able to connect with people who feel like home. And we should never take that for granted, but we should also not use it as a substitute for building community in our actual community, because we have completely lost the plot. It's not just about hanging out with the people who are just like you. Look at unions. I hate to say this because it's such a bad example with all of its racist and colonialist background, but look at our country. I mean, don't look at it too close, but the whole point of the United States forming was people forming together, joining together for a common goal. Unions are a better example. Look at unions, right? We're all carpenters, we're all electricians, we're all nurses, we're all teachers, whatever. We might not have anything else in common except our profession, but we have that in common, and we all work in a small area. So let's band together and make sure that things are good for our profession in this area, that we have a living wage, that we have benefits, that we have job security, etc., etc., etc. It's the same point. It's the same idea. And we just kind of forget it because we've live in like established societies pretty much everywhere now. And so we forget that that was the whole point of doing that. It's so that we can work together with each other, those who live in proximity to us, to have a better way of life. And this is why so many people are so isolated from their community and so isolated politically, and why so few things can happen from a political standpoint, from, quite frankly, a revolutionary standpoint. Because we don't even know what the political beliefs are of the people who live next to us. We don't talk to them. We don't know how they voted. We don't know what they believe. We don't know if there's somebody who needs to be protected from ICE. We don't know if there's somebody who would protect us if ICE showed up. We don't know at all because we don't interact with them. And that is a moral failing on our part, on the part of society and the part of the individual. Because we signed up to work collectively, and the entirety of our input into the collective, for the most part, I'm not speaking individually, you know who you are and what you do, the entirety of our input is just showing up to work and paying taxes, paying money into the local economy by buying gas and groceries. We can do better. We've got to do better. Nothing is going to get better unless we do individually. And now you probably understand why I started the episode with everyone thinks that women are crazy when they hit perimenopause, because this perimenopausal bitch is really tired. And I'm really tired of living in a society without any benefit of living in a society. Are you? How do you feel? What benefits are you getting from living in a society? What are you putting in to your society? How are you pouring into your community? How is your community pouring into you? Are you letting your community pour into you? Because that is a huge problem in the entirety of our society, is that we don't allow our community to benefit us. There's so many more people willing to show up for people than to allow people to show up for them. Ask yourself these questions and ask yourself what you want to do about it wherever you fall on that spectrum. And while you're asking yourself those questions and thinking about it, weekly reminder that I do have a Patreon now. You can join for free or you can subscribe. There's 4 tiers ranging from $3 a month to $33 a month. If you go to my Linktree, linktree.com/mosaic in progress, you can find all of my links. And if you're feeling generous or got a nice Christmas bonus and want to share the love, there are links to just give me a little donation, buy me a coffee, whatever. Not the Buy Me a Coffee app, which I recently learned is an actual thing, that when people say buy me a coffee, they don't mean like, hey, give me $5. It's an actual app. I do not have that one. But the others I do have. And I hope you will follow me wherever you follow creators, and that you'll join me next week as we both continue to work on our Mosaic in Progress.